I am Will, aka Ambi, and I'm joined here with Ariel.
AKA Kai.
So we've been watching the protests going on, over the world. We've been keeping a very close eye to the one in Washington D.C. because that one has been, the kind of the craziest one, the one with the most.
It's been the most politically relevant.
Yeah.
And I hate to say that one riot kind of supersedes another, and it's not even a riot at this point, but that's what we've come to know it as, because it's kind of been continuing this issue of police brutality. It's been continuing these protests, and at every single protest, if you look back to the 60s up until now, it's always in response to police brutality.
Yeah.
It is always in response to somebody either misusing a chokehold, misusing police, excessive use of police force, and then getting acquitted.
And Washington D.C. is also, it's very famous for all the civil rights marches that happened in the past, and apparently continue to happen to this very day. In Washington D.C. in particular, a lot has been said by the president. A lot has been said from the mayor and the governor there. Like we saw that they called them weak, and their response was to change the street that leads to the White House now to Black Lives Matter Street.
Plaza.
Plaza? It's Plaza?
It's a plaza. They also painted in really big block letters on the same street, Black Lives Matter. And this kind of comes more as a performative act. The politician who, I believe was the governor, the governor who decided that this would be a good move forward, to kind of put the idea that Black Lives Matter out in the forefront. You can't go past that street. You can't walk past the street. You can't protest past the street. You can't drive on the street without seeing the sentiment Black Lives Matter. But it kind of goes beyond that, because where's the actual reform? Where's the actual change? The Black Lives Matter protesters are saying Black Lives Matter. It's not because they want necessarily streets named after Black Lives Matter. They want reform. They want to stop being killed unnecessarily.
And for many, they take this, the renaming of that street as something historic, something that, with these particular, row of protests, and that it is something that we will remember, for the rest of, history in Washington, D.C. And also, like, something like you just said about that there needs to be reform that is not just about being heard. It is about them taking action. I keep hearing the phrase said by Malcolm X. Was talking about the white liberals calling them foxes, that they are the most dangerous one. And a lot of it is because they pretend to care, they listen, but they don't act. And I keep hearing, people talking about Trump saying that he's done more than Biden and more than Obama and all these other presidents.
The argument is that he hasn't done anything. This idea that you can paint the phrase Black Lives Matter on a street, that you can change the name of a street to Black Lives Matter Plaza. To me, that seems performative at best and ignorant at worst. If that came out of taxpayer money, if that came out of private money, that could have come from defunding the police in that state.
The ones that we are seeing here.
Yes.
Going up against normal law-abiding citizens.
Yes, and this isn't to say to defund the police completely. This is to say stop using 133 million US dollars of taxpayer money on lawsuits, on wrongful death lawsuits, on settlements against civilians. So what we're seeing now is that these protests against the treatment of George Floyd, of Rodney King, of all of these people who have been brutalized by police. That's where the frustration lies, because if this is what we heard about, if these are protests based on a continued series of events that have not changed since at least the 1960s, we're not even going to go before that.
Yeah.
But if this is continuously happening, and there's been no real change, what does painting Black Lives Matter on a street change?
Right now, I think it's a good time to criticize both sides. If, they keep arguing on who's done the most, but the truth is neither have done enough. Again, we were hearing, Joe Biden saying, if you vote for Trump, you're not black. Again, using the criticism that I'm hearing a lot from conservatives using Malcolm X, who is a very, strong black rights activist, and them using it against them.
And we can't bring up Malcolm X without bringing up the true, real definition and the true, real movement of the Black Panthers. Because nobody ever seems to talk about that the Black Panthers were the ones protecting black youth, that they were the ones funding the education of black youth, that they were the ones putting money back into their communities and funding an economy. Then this isn't the first instance of the Black Panther, that whole Black Panther mentality. The last time that sort of happened was what we now know as Black Wall Street, because there was such a thriving community and the surrounding white communities did not want to see that. So yeah, they burned that down so many decades ago. But then when you have Black Panthers who are trying to liberate their community, who are trying to protect their community against a system of systemic oppression, against police brutality, against what was very clearly segregation, and they are being attacked for it. So yeah, this has been an ongoing beatdown of anything to challenge the current police reform, anything to challenge the current notion that the police are to serve and protect. Anyone who says differently is going to be, like, to not mince words, is going to be shot down.
There's a lot of reforms, not just legislation. It comes down to the individual hearts, and it comes down to the police officers. I keep hearing people bring up, that Blue Lives Matter too. And again, nobody has said, besides, that they are bad until they've proven that they are all good. We actually have been given an amazing opportunity today to talk to somebody who's gone through the training, who's gone through everything that needs to be happening. She actually served her community as an officer of the law. And yeah, let's see if we can get her on the call right now. Hi, Ashley. Are you there?
Hey. Yep, I'm here. Hi.
This is a very unique time because I have yet to hear any officers publicly comment, especially on the news or anywhere else, about even their training. I'm very curious to see, what was your training like? What was your experience being trained in de-escalation techniques using non-lethal force and lethal force?
In our training, not only was there the physical component, but there was the component where you actually had to learn the laws, how to interpret them, how to apply them, and not only that, but how to explain them. Because, one of the most important things when you are, let's say, arresting someone or explaining to somebody why they're being detained, you have to be able to articulate why you're doing what you're doing. Otherwise, you're going to face a court case. We used a lot of different de-escalation techniques, and a lot of them, kind of focus on just hearing out what your constituent or civilian is saying. A lot of times people act out, whether it be aggression or frustration, because, something triggers that. And when you arrive on scene, you don't really know what the situation may be. There have been plenty of times where we've shown up to domestic disturbance calls, and the family members will end up turning on us because we showed up. To be able to handle the situation effectively, a lot of times people just want to be heard. And I think a lot of that is missing today. Now, in terms of lethal force, I was trained anyway to only use that as a last resort. You're taught to use your de-escalation techniques first. If those don't work, you kind of match the situation to the severity at hand. So, for example, it wouldn't make any sense for me for a guy who is, let's say urinating in public, to pull a gun on him. The situation has to match on both ends. So I wouldn't pull my gun unless I saw imminent threat to my life.
So with that being said, do you believe that some previous prejudice may have affected some officers? The implicit bias of seeing somebody as an imminent threat. Do you think that is something that has happened?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Could you give any examples?
I've been on both ends of that, actually. So, having been in law enforcement, I have not only encountered people who have said, well, how did you even become a cop? You're obviously an affirmative action hire.
Wow.
Yeah, I've had everything thrown at me. And from the opposite end, my Black brothers and sisters, oh, you're a sellout. You're a snitch. I can't be around you anymore.
Did they call
So
you, a traitor? I've heard that phrase be
a
used on
sellout.
other people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sellout.
Yeah.
I've heard sellout.
Mm-hmm.
Sellout, Uncle Tom, gotten it all.
And
So
Uncle Tom, that's
Yeah.
real. That goes real deep.
Yeah.
that goes Harry
Real
Potter so
deep.
deep.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of bias built into, even our Constitution. I would have been considered 3/4 of a person or 3/5 of a person years and years ago, subhuman. And I believe that bias still exists today. I live out here in Alpine, East County, San Diego, and, I went out the other day and I've had some slurs thrown my way because they
Really?
just, oh yeah. Mm-hmm. That's the same thing,
So of the people who were doing such slurs, can you describe them a little bit? Why were they a person of color? Or was it more like poor, rich? Like I'm very curious to see what are the types of people who are going to do something like this?
I know in my experience, people who have thrown racial slurs at me have always kind of come from the same socioeconomic background.
Well, I live in an area in East County where it's predominantly white, predominantly older, retired, a lot of military, a lot of police, firemen, retired military. There aren't many people that look like me around. The person that threw this at me was an older white woman who just so happened to have a Trump sticker on the back of her car. I thought she was giving me glares because she was worried I was going to leave my dog in the car. But when I got out, it wasn't that at all. I've had to be, a very, very upstanding citizen just to be considered a regular person. But, kind of like the whole stereotype with pit bulls. Oh, all pit bulls are evil. All black people are this or that. Anywho, turning on the AC for the dog, I have the back windows cracked. I have the front windows cracked. I'm giving her the talk, saying I'll be right back, making sure she's good to go. Meanwhile, this is a cool day. So, I see this lady pull up to my right. She's in a big white Tahoe, and she's just glaring at me. I'm like, oh, gosh, another animal activist, great. But, I get out of the car. She's like, you looting niggers are going to get what you deserve.
Wow.
And that's where we live.
Yeah.
This is happening
right.
where we live.
And immediately it's just showing prejudice towards somebody's skin color, not knowing that these are the same people that they're saying Blue Lives Matter, All Lives Matter as a retort, as a response to this movement.
It's just so interesting to me that people can say all lives matter and then throw racial slurs at people.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's the same analogy as a house being on fire, right? If your house is on fire, the fire department's coming to your house to put out the fire. Somebody coming outside and looking at the fire down the street and saying, "Well, are you gonna put water on my house too? Because my house matters too." I'm sorry, my house is on fire right now. I'm not saying your house doesn't matter at all. I'm just saying I need a little extra help right now.
And I just kind of want to bring it back to your experience with this person who was very racially abusive towards you. I do feel like you were very quickly put in a situation where any reaction you had to think, like, she didn't have to think about what she said to you because fact of the matter, she would have gotten away with it. But when you react, you have to think, like, how is this going to reflect not just on me, but on everyone that she associates with.
Right. Right. And that's what I mean about having to, be the upstanding citizen, because one black person does something stupid, oh, you're all stupid. And that's just how it's been. Can't tell you how many times I've been associated with things that didn't even apply to me. It's kind of sad, but, people are ignorant and all you can do is pray for them, and I had a choice that day. I could either get out of the car and start cursing her out like I wanted to,
Like she would have done it had you said anything to her.
Right. So, you know what I did?
What did you do?
I really want to know what you did.
I smiled at her with the biggest grin on my face. I said, "Oh, okay, have a nice day." And I waved at her and I gets off into the store, and that pissed her off.
And I feel like that would be the perfect time to say that you were law enforcement. That because that's what that because the divide right now is Black Lives Matter versus police, and people don't realize that you're born black. You decide to become a police officer, so you can go back and forth with if you're a blue life, but you can't go back and forth if you're black.
Right, exactly. Why can't I be a black woman and support my cause to bring equality and justice to the black community? And why can't I also have a healthy respect for what law enforcement is supposed to stand for?
It was an interesting choice of words there when you said what law enforcement is supposed to be. Does that mean that law enforcement in your experience has never been to the standard that you expected it to be, or that it has gotten worse in recent years? Or does it seem like it got worse because there's video evidence, but it's kind of always been like that?
I see it as it's always been like that, but now we have better technology. A lot of this stuff wouldn't come to light if people didn't pull out their cell phones. And you know what? I grew up in a really troubled community. I didn't start off with a cell phone. I started with a beeper. I couldn't see something and then, complain about it if it was wrong, because I lived in a neighborhood where there were gangs and there were a lot of, problems there. But it's just really hard when you grow up afraid of the police and you try to be the change you want to see in the world, but it doesn't happen. I grew up afraid of the police. I didn't know anything better. I remember the days my mom was a single mother for a while. She would do anything and everything she could to keep food on the table. That's just how she is. And I remember, every time we would go out, she'd be like, hey, if you, see a police officer, tell me. And, I'm thinking it's just, we're kind of making it a game, like punch buggy or, something like that. But I was looking for the police. And, I later found out the reason I was looking for the police was because she couldn't afford to pay her tags because she'd rather spend her money on getting us food. And we knew that if she got pulled over, they would take the car and any means that she had to get to work.
So that kind of goes back into the poverty cycle.
Yeah, the systemic side where it makes sure that you can't get out of that cycle of being, only an essential worker instead of just being treated as an essential human being.
Yeah, and the ironic thing is that this is kind of seen as a minority problem. But isn't this how Les Miserables was started? There's there's 3 novels and a Broadway play on it. And we can look at that and be like, this is art, we get it, this is history, this happened in France. But it's happening now. Because you have people who can't afford means doing what they can to afford their means. And sometimes it's prioritization. So how do you choose between how to get to work and how to get food?
Because again, right now I'm hearing a lot of people talking about defund the police and that money should be put into better programs, better social work infrastructure to help prevent the crimes before they even happen. Do you what is your perspective as being a law enforcement? Do you think that you guys need more help, or that or that you should just reallocate the funds already in there? Or are you pro, defunding and putting the money back into the community in a different way?
I see it on both sides. Police are essential. Let's face it. Crime is going to happen. A certain amount of money should be invested into the people that are supposed to protect us. On the flip side of that, if you think about it, if you're investing into the right places, you won't really need the police. We've had problems with homelessness, with drugs, with runaway teens. You name it, I've seen it. But if we focus more on rehabilitation versus incarceration, I think we'd see a real change. And there wouldn't be the need. I don't see a need for AR-15s in the first place in law enforcement. There's no reason why a weapon of war should be held in a police car. That's just my take on it. But there won't be a need for such a police presence if we're putting our money in the right place. I see every person as an investment. Back in the early 1960s, I want to say, and probably even earlier than that, the government invested in the education of its citizens because, let's face it, you got nothing to do, you're going to resort to doing some bad stuff maybe.
Yeah.
But they invested in education because they wanted productive citizens. What do productive citizens do? They stay out of trouble. They could, contribute to the economy. The economy grows. You become a superpower. So I think we really need to get back in that habit of thinking about allocating our money to the right places while keeping the necessary services that are needed to function in society.
Speaking of weapons of war, what's your take on the use of tear gas that's been used against protesters? I say that because it's illegal in military war zones to use tear gas on opposing forces, but in every single protest that has turned violent thus far, there's been a use of tear gas against peaceful protesters. So I'm just wondering if you knew why police had access to that when most of our military doesn't.
You know what? That baffles me too.
Mm-hmm.
It baffles me too. And also in police culture, we are told not to ask those questions because if you do, you're not trustworthy.
My takeaway from that is that there's a culture of silence in the police community. Am I interpreting that correctly?
You sure are.
And I mean, that would explain a lot.
Yeah. Well,
it explains a ton. It explains, for example, the poor gentleman in Buffalo, New York. You see him just kind of airing his grievances, which is what we can do as our First Amendment right. Let's not forget that. But this guy is pushed to the ground with a baton by, one person and pushed with the hand by another person. He falls to the ground. Blood's coming out of this poor man's ears, and they're just walking by. I found out the report was originally written as, oh, he tripped. And as long as that's the report and as long as everybody agrees to that, then that's what it is until that camera footage comes out. And then all of a sudden, oh, I had a lapse in judgment, or, well, I didn't exactly remember. I was confused at the time. Oh, let me review my notes.
Yeah,
and
so
this might be a bit I understand if you wouldn't be able to speak on this, but how often did that happen in your experience, just being in law enforcement and your personal time there?
It happened a lot. I'm not gonna lie to you. It happened a lot, and it was very sad because if you shut up and didn't say anything, that meant you survived. But if you stood up and said something, it's the same thing. Snitches get stitches kind of thing. It's the same thing. It's the same thing everywhere. That's universal,
That sounds like gang intimidation techniques being used also in the police department.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you don't conform, they will force you out. My problem is that I like to ask questions. If I feel something's not right, I'll ask.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't always taken as asking a question or inquiring about something. It was taken as being defensive or wanting to pick a fight.
Do you think you being a person of color may have elevated even higher than had it been a white officer asking that?
Oh, absolutely. Okay. Okay, well, so a very special person is in the room with me, and he's a white boy, and I'm about to say something about white boys. But, it's kind of like the example of a white guy gets pulled over, and he can yell at the police and curse at them and say, I want your fucking badge number, and all this stuff. If a black man even, disagrees or doesn't take the keys out of the damn car quick enough, he's pulled out on the ground, suffocated. And a lot of people don't really see that.
You brought up, the fact that he can ask for the police badge number and the name of the officer. Right now during these protests, a lot of cops are, quote, standing in unity, unquote, by blocking their name and their badge number when they are at these protests. What do you feel, being an officer? I know the law is supposed to say that it should be plain in public. At least I hope it's a law.
You're supposed to be able to show your name and your badge number at all times, so you are held accountable for your actions.
Even in full riot gear?
Absolutely.
And that's interesting because no one wearing full riot gear at these protests have shown their badges or names. Even with the looting, you have people saying you're looting because somebody died, or these people are rioting because somebody died. And personally, yes, of course, more than one person died. But when more than one person dies, either at the hands of law enforcement or at the hands of people who consider themselves law enforcement, At what point would you say that kind of becomes ground for reform?
The time for reform was a long time ago. A lot of these young Black people were not given their due process. Emmett Till was accused of whistling at a white woman, and people felt it necessary to beat him senseless until he died. They couldn't even have an open casket because they messed that kid up so much. I know he was really young when it happened too.
Yeah, he was 12 or something. He was
Yeah,
about 12 or 13
yeah,
years old.
yeah. And what person's brain, does that really make sense if you're humane at all?
And
And
the
sadly,
interesting thing about Emmett Till is
yeah.
that the woman who initially accused him is still alive. She did recant on her story. She did say that
Mhm.
it never happened. So, but she's alive and she's walking free. She has a family. She has grandkids now. Just because the pictures of Emmett Till were black and white does not mean this was a very long time ago. This was within our immediate family's generation.
Sadly, a lot of people are thinking, oh, this is recent. Oh, this is recent. No, we're just catching it on camera now.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have anybody pull a camera on you? And what was your experience knowing that there's a camera on you during that time?
Integrity is defined as doing the right thing even when no one is looking. First time I got a camera pulled on me, I had no cares in the world because you know what? I had no reason to fear what I was doing because I knew that I went onto the clock every day knowing that I would do right by the people I was going to protect and serve. I didn't have to worry about that. But a lot of people did not like it. And I mean, here's the thing. I don't like it when somebody takes a bad photo of me. I get that, you know, but it goes much deeper than that. It's like if you're doing everything right, why are you afraid? You are in the public. People are looking at you. What's the difference if there's a camera on you as long as you're doing everything right?
And to go back on your actual training, I know in some states, in order to be a licensed barber, you have to have around 1,500 hours of practice and of service. And I just wanted to know, in comparison, how many hours did you need in order to become law enforcement officer?
Depending on the type of academy that you're in, most correctional, so let's say you're going for a simple peace officer standard training certificate, you have the option to take lots of different varieties of courses. Or if you're trained to go into patrol, would obviously need a lot more hours. But if you want to be certified in something, you could take a 40-hour class and get certified in powers of arrest. The patrol academies would usually last about 6 to 8 months and could extend depending on how you were progressing. Corrections academies would last about 4 to 6 months, but they got out a lot quicker because, again, they didn't have to learn that law component. Because, again, going back to the beginning, you have to be able to articulate the laws in which you enforce. It's kind of complicated, so it's more time. But, 6 to 8 months.
So during your training, I am curious, do they teach you the history of the police force and
how, the reason why it got started, when it was founded, the reasonings for it? When you said you had to learn about the police, was it just on the current law or was it on the past and its history as well?
For academy standards, yes. I learned that sheriff is actually derived from the words shire reeve. In Ireland, that's what they would call, their police officers, the shire reeve, the reeve of the shire. So, bring it over to America, shire reeve sheriff. So, it goes way back, and there are so many standards that they want you to meet. Diversity, inclusion, lots of different things that they want you to embody when you're a member of the force. They get pretty deep.
Do you feel that your training was sufficient? Do you wish that you had more, that you had too much, or is the program and the academy that you went through, would you advocate for it?
They do teach a lot of good things in the academy. They teach you a little bit about health. They teach you a little bit about mental awareness. They teach you about a lot of things. But here's the thing. Here's the gap. We're given a lot of discretionary freedom in what we do. You are given the toolkit to go out there and enforce the laws and, keep the peace. But what you choose to do on your time is ultimately up to you because you have that discretion. You're trusted with that discretion. it's kind of like getting superpowers and, asking, okay, well, do I use them for good or bad?
Because that sounds a lot like the response that I heard when the police captains were asked about using what was called, I think, the warrior style or the warrior technique in
Mhm.
Minneapolis, which is a self-funded off-duty fear-based training. And they said that it was up to the discretion that they weren't going to prevent their officers from receiving this kind of training that tells them that they are natural-born killers, and if they get the right mindset, if they learn their tools, that they can then enforce it without hesitation. Do you believe being able to have that kind of freedom may have also led to more aggression from their officers?
Absolutely. Again, you have that power of discretion.
So
It
what's
matters what you do
speaking
with
on
it.
discretion? What would be your take on? Because it sounds like you believe in the tools that police officers are given. Does that mean like you want police officers to be held more accountable? What's your take on police accountability?
Oh, absolutely. It's ingrained in you to have integrity. When you're going through your background check, I mean, this thing is like 40 pages long. They want to know where you live for the last 10 years. They want to know everybody that you associate with. You definitely want to delete your Facebook or Instagram, all your social handles. You want to be crystal clean because if you're essentially going to be trusted to care for the public, they want to make sure that, as good as they get.
So what
But
happens between the time when you enter the academy and you're super clean and you do this 40-page background check, and then somewhere along the line there's all this evidence of excessive police brutality that has spanned riots and protests, quests for reform for the last how many decades? Where in your experience would you say that discipline falls off?
I think it falls off when people get complacent in their jobs. I think it happens when people get burned out in their jobs. There are some people in there that, were bright-eyed rookies, and 30 years later, they hate people, but they
Mm.
can't leave the job because that's all they know. Sure, some of the skills would translate into other jobs, but, after 30 years, do you really want to go and be the rookie at another place?
And going with that, I know, again, bringing up the source from Psychology Today, they were talking about how a quarter of police officers are struggling with a form of addictions, alcoholism, and even drug addiction,
Were the police officers provided essential mental help?
and resources for that.
Because you did mention that you learn about it, but once you learn about it and once you're in the field experiencing this, do you have the resources to care for yourself, or is there a stigma against trying to care for yourself mentally?
Yeah, it's a great question. The resources were there, but accepting the resources was hard for a lot of people.
Mm.
When you are out in public, you are seen to be the protector of the community. You want to look rational. You want to be stoic. You want to put on this front like, shit hits the fan. I got this. I can figure it out. When it comes to self-care, a lot of us neglect ourselves because are taught to think, I got this. Yeah, I got this. I got this. I got this. But see something happen to a little kid, see your first dead body, that brain kicks in. I got this. I got this. I know how to handle this. I know how to handle this. But there's no rule book on how to handle emotionally seeing the 3-year-old who was raped and killed. If you do seek help, you're perceived as weak.
So there's
Now,
still a perception of weakness within seeking mental help in the force.
at least in my experience.
And going along with that, I'm trying to help find out where's the source of the fear of opening up. Like you said, like if you ask too many questions, they start seeing you as bad. So if you start using the resources, is it possible that they start seeing you as a liability and as though you're making the force look bad? Because, if people are using those resources, it means that there is a problem.
Here's the thing that I will say about that, and I feel divided on this. A lot of times when the person is seeking the resources, that is private due to HIPAA. Everything is made confidential because the HIPAA privacy rules. So nobody really knows that you're seeking help. Nobody really knows that you're just putting on this strong face in the day and, calling for therapy at night. And it's not easy to talk about because, yeah, you will be seen as a liability if you say, hey, you know what? I need a mental day. I'm just not doing well. I recall a particular situation. I was on patrol one night. I came upon the first year anniversary of my father's passing. And most of the day I was great. I was happy. I'm like, you know what? Hey, Dad, I'm thinking about you. I'm happy. And as time progressed, started to get a little bit more tired in the evening. You know, that kind of emotional barrier started to break down too. I ended up bawling out of control, lost it because it was so fresh to me. And there's no feeling like losing a parent, you know. I wasn't strong that night, so I called in my partner and I said, hey, I think I need to go. I'm not doing well mentally right now. This is what's going on. And so I left early for the day. I didn't know where else to go but to my mom's. I drove to her house and I'm, you know, just crying out of control. Probably should not have been driving at that time, but that's where I needed to be at the time. I went to my mom and I told her everything that had happened. And not only was she worried about me, but she also knew that there might be a problem because I was supposed to show that I was strong. She told me, she said, you can't show them that because then they'll find a reason to let you go. This will just be one reason for them to get rid of you because you're asking questions. This will be their reason to let you go. They can say you're a liability and you're out of a job. You can't show them you're weak. I just felt so conflicted about it because I'm like, but I'm a human being. This is going to happen. But at the same time, I get it. I get it. You know, I'm not even going to lie to you. It was joked while I was in law enforcement, like, oh, yeah, you're the affirmative action hire. And I'm just like, ha, 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 ha. When I really thought about that, there's a reason there's some truth to it. And I've always felt that way.
And when your mom said those things about you can't show emotion, that this is going to be a reason why they let you go, was that based on her observations of you at your job, or was that her mentality going into it?
I had told her a lot about my experiences in law enforcement and whatnot. I told her a lot of the things that I've seen and a lot of the things that have happened to coworkers of mine where, you know, they ended up on the other side of the barrel. She's like, you just can't be that person because I know how much this means to you and I don't want to lose your job, but at the same time, you're my child. Let it out. She always told me, just know your place. You know, you just can't be asking questions all the time. You know, and I'm like, but Mom, I'm standing up for myself. She said, yeah. I get that, but know your place. And when she said that, that broke my heart. And she said, know your place.
What does that mean then, to know your place in law enforcement? To be complicit?
Yeah, because I'm a Black woman. The last thing you want is a Black woman asking questions and speaking out of line.
And I'm just thinking about this and everything you said, and then pulling up to a grocery store and having somebody throw a racial epithet at you. I can't comprehend that. I've never gone through it.
It's especially because you were working through the system. You were trying to do things correctly in the best way possible. You were being an example citizen. Like, you asking questions, you know, anybody should be able should feel free to ask questions at any job as to what's going on, because it promotes transparency, but also it promotes, you know, a new way of thinking that can lead to growth. From personal experiences, if you're able to bring up problems, it means that down the line it won't blow up in everybody's face if those problems are met much earlier. But it sounds that in your situation, a lot of the problems that were there, and a person of color is seeing it in person, the other side of what it was like to be in law enforcement, and having this unique perspective could have made a bigger change had it not been for the politics and the pressure.
When I first spoke to you and you told me that you were in law enforcement, when you told me initially, I had no idea. Just because we obviously hadn't known each other that long at that point. When you had mentioned it, you had also followed it up with, because I'd asked you why. I was like, why did you want, to be in law enforcement? And you said, because I wanted to help people. Because I saw how they didn't help me as a kid, and I wanted to be the person to help. My impression of you reflecting on your experience in law enforcement feels like you haven't been helped, no matter how much you may have helped your community.
Absolutely, nail on the head.
Oh, I didn't expect that to be a nail on the head. I was ready for her to say, no, it's like, I feel better, but I didn't want that to be a negative intention.
No.
Previous two people we talked to yesterday, and even friends of ours have all said that they have a cop story. They ask any Black person about their cop story. And you said that you were afraid when you were younger of the police. Is that because you already had a cop story when you were younger?
The interesting thing about me is I have multiple cop stories.
And that's the
That's the
same
same thing
response.
everyone has said.
They're like, which one do you want? Do you want this one? Do you want that
Yeah,
one?
like
Mm-hmm.
you want a good one, you want a bad one, you want one everything.
Like when I ask you, tell me your cop story. There's obviously something that comes to mind first, if anything has happened to you, but the second experience I wanted to know, like, what cop experience, and this could have happened before you were one or while you were after. What would be the first experience that came to mind, and if it's not separate, which experience most affected you?
Oh, that's a great question. Because two stories come to mind. First time I get pulled over. Here I am, 16 years old. I pretty much graduated high school. Before lunchtime, I would be free to go home because I was taking college courses at the same time. I'm leaving school, and I've got a little 1983 Dodge Aries, maroon in color with velour on the roof. No joke. I became a mechanic. I'm a Jill of a lot of trades, let me tell you. Was leaving school and got about halfway there, and I remember I was right by Lincoln High School, 905. I get pulled over. Oh my gosh, my heart was pounding. I started crying for no reason. My hands had sweat dripping off of them. I thought I was going to die because I had seen the Rodney King beatings in 1992. That's what I grew up with. I was afraid. I can't even tell you. It was fight or flight. I had to really think about which one was better at the time. And I couldn't do either. I had to just sit there. The police officer walks up to the window, and I'm trembling, visibly crying already. I have my insurance ready. I have my driver's license ready. I have my registration ready. I know better than to be fidgeting around in the car when a police officer comes up. So he comes up to me and he says, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" I had no clue. I felt like I was on TV, on Jeopardy, answered the $2 million question. I didn't know how to answer that. I said, "I don't know." And he said, "Well, honey, I thought your car was going to blow up." And I just started laughing and crying, and there's this relief and this explanation that still needs to come out. I told him, I'm so sorry, sir. I'm so sorry. I forgot to put WD-40 on the fan belt this morning, and I checked the transmission and moved this and that." And he said, "Wow, you're talented, but you can stop now." And I would have kept going. Long story short, he pulled me over because he was concerned. He was genuinely concerned for my safety, and that was it.
But at the same time, you were fearful for your life for an officer, and it happened to be with an officer who didn't mean well, that meant something good. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't take away from the fact that you were afraid immediately. That was your initial response after you saw police getting away with the beating of Rodney King.
And the aftermath.
And all the aftermath that came after that.
Right.
So your second story, did this come before or after this experience?
This was after, and this was when I was actually part of law enforcement myself.
Okay. And were you on duty?
I had just gotten off my shift.
Mm-hmm.
Just ended my shift. So I was still in partial uniform. I'm on the 54 going east, and I had just recently moved from Imperial Beach to National City. A little, set my ways in where I drove, and I found myself almost missing my exit. So I'm in the next lane over. I just need to get over, and I get kind of close. I'm cutting it close. And I'm like, "Ooh, okay. Wow, I made that. Thank God." Next thing you know, I see flashing lights behind me. Now, mind you, the sun is in my rear view. Can't really see much. Then I see the light. I get pulled over, and I hear it coming from the motorcycle. "God damn it, son of a bitch!" Just yelling. And I'm like, "Oh my God, what's going on?" And this motorcycle cop is yelling and screaming and spitting in my face. And, "Do you know that you cut off an officer of the law? You know, you almost killed me. You know." And at this point, I'm crying. I haven't had a chance to do anything because, usually the thing is pull over, get your insurance, registration, and everything out. But when I heard that, I'm like, oh my gosh. He came to the car, my hands were already up. He's just yelling, and I'm just taking this. I'm just terrified. And this, like I said, this is after getting off a shift. Immediately, I wanted to say, hey, it's okay. I'm a cop. It's fine. I'm in law enforcement. I'm so sorry. Like, let me get away with this. But I didn't. I didn't want to use that because, you're told that you're not supposed to, even though I know a lot of people do it anyway. And at the same time, I have integrity. You know what? I fucked up that day. So I wasn't going to, try to get out of it by leaving something shiny and
using your privilege that you have.
That you earned.
Right.
You've earned.
Yeah. I wasn't going to do it because I knew I did wrong. And so I took it, and he wrote me the ticket. He said, where are you coming from anyway? I told him, I said, I'm coming from work. I'm coming from the sheriff's station. And then he looked at me like, well, I already wrote the ticket. And
as though he would have not given it to you just because you're one of them.
Yeah, do you think he wouldn't have given it to you if you mentioned that you were in law enforcement?
Yeah. I think so.
So with that, it almost sounds like cops do work in a different set of rules. If the people who are supposed to enforce the laws, it sounds like the rules don't apply to them as well.
Well, some people definitely do take it way too far, but in general, I don't think that's really the case.
Okay.
I think it's more of a brotherhood kind of thing. One of the questions I was perplexed with when I was undergoing my lieutenant's interview was, you're on patrol at night, you're driving down the street, notice a car that's swerving, you have probable cause to pull them over for intoxication, you're clearly thinking this is a DUI. You pull up, you start your investigation, you're talking to this person, you're walking up and inquiring, and you find out it's your sergeant. What do you do?
I feel like the correct answer would be to write the ticket.
Yeah. But
correct answer would be to get him off the road.
See, that's
but at the same time, it's a good one because at the same time, if you answer the question one way, you're like, does that make me a snitch? And if you answer the question the other way, like, yeah, I have integrity. Depends on what you're looking for. Obviously chose the right answer. The law is the law, no matter who breaks it.
So if somebody's swerving in general, the answer is to get them off the road?
Not swerving in general. Some people, are distracted and correct themselves. But if you have a strong suspicion of DUI, you can smell it, you can see the nystagmus in the eyes, tell, people are slurring their speech, then, you might want to get that person off the road due to either alcohol intoxication or narcotic intoxication or maybe some sort of imbalance. I would say that the thing that bothers me most, someone says something about me that I know and they know are untrue. I hold my integrity in the highest regard because from a kid, I was taught, yes, sir, no, sir, tell the truth, and you won't get killed. Maybe.
So with that, I saw a video today. It looks like they were trying to make it viral in order to not get in trouble with the cops, to just say, if they ask you any questions, it is best to respond saying, I don't answer questions. We saw a video in La Mesa where a black man was just waiting for his friends, and the cop started asking him questions, saying where he's coming from. He accused the man as well of holding drugs. Thankfully, his body cam caught that he's the one that instigated, the assault, and that the man never touched him, besides, out of a reaction. So if let's say a cop goes up to a person who is minding their own business, is that an appropriate response?
Like to say, I don't answer questions, or
just not to incriminate themselves if they aren't doing nothing, because they were giving the advice for people of color when they are interacting with officers.
A lot of the time, there are what's called a field investigation, or like a field FI. That just means that you are going up to talk to someone, ask them some questions. They're not detained, they're not arrested. It's just, oh, hey, I had a question for you. Generally, that's prompted by something called probable cause. You can't just go and harass people. You have to have probable cause. You have to have a valid legal reason to go and ask someone a question.
Are civilians allowed to ask, what the probable cause? So if...
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah. So if a civilian asked, let's just say, given the scenario of an offending officer, what's the probable cause? Does the officer then have to answer that question?
They should.
Wait, but you said should, but we're asking if they need to.
if they need to, and what happens if they don't?
That's where that gray area comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Are you really conducting an investigation? Because if you're in an active investigation, let's say that there are systems in place where we are able to go up to people to assist them. I have often been battered spouses, male and female, that have tried to find a safe place to meet with an officer to speak about what's going on. It just so happens that that person is in that meeting place and the officer is conducting that investigation, going to speak to that person. Someone just happens to overhear what's going on and see that somebody's asking this woman questions. They come up and say, well, what are you doing? What's your probable cause? What are you doing? In that situation, it's okay to say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to answer any questions about that. So it really depends. And it sucks that there's no clear answer. There's no black and white answer, but really a lot of it depends.
Yeah, because there are a lot of instances, and that is a really good example of you're protecting a constituent.
Yeah.
So it really just depends. There's so many different situations you can be thrown into where, people are thinking that you're withholding information when you're just conducting a simple investigation, and you can't expose information that is likely to damage another individual.
Yeah, thank you for answering that question. Like, that did bring some more light, just how to interact with an officer as well. I have one last question. Across the street from where I live, there was an instance of cops telling an essential worker who was working at this, I think it was a Starbucks or somewhere in there, that had a mask that said Black Lives Matter, and they said that they felt unsafe going to that establishment.
They were trying to order the individual wearing the mask to leave.
To not wear it anymore because it made them feel unsafe. As a person who was in enforcement, does Black Lives Matter or even ACAB, which a lot of officers are taking personally, all cops are bad, all cops are bastards. And seeing that in the streets, does that make you feel unsafe if somebody were to find out that you either were or are an officer?
Let me answer it like this. What scares me? MAGA hats.
But would you go up to somebody wearing a MAGA hat and ask them to take it off?
No, not at all. First Amendment, whether I agree with you or not.
Mm-hmm. They were white individuals that were asking to take the person to remove the mask. So it kind of does bring a sense of privilege into the conversation that I feel is important.
Yeah. And you know what? If somebody said that to me, oh, why is that? Why don't you feel unsafe around me? I would just ask them that question, and I'm sure they'd be baffled. Are you assuming that I'm going to, I don't know, grab your purse, or like, do you think I have a gun or chemical weapons in my backpack? Like, what's the basis for this? What makes you so afraid? Sorry, I didn't know I wasn't intending to dress up as the boogeyman today. My bad.
That's a good question, though. What makes you so afraid? What would you say? Obviously, because you can't speak for all cops. You can't speak for an entire community. You can only speak as an individual. But what would you say cops fear? Is it because I think the argument right now is that, generally speaking, cops who practice police brutality are terrified of accountability. But within the community, within that brotherhood, that sisterhood of law enforcement, what exactly drives fear? Is it accountability? Is it acts committed by a certain community of people, or individual things with each person that kind of disperse?
And this goes for all human beings. We are afraid of what we do not understand. And I'll say again,
conversation starts.
Yes. We are afraid of what we do not understand. A lot of people are afraid of change. A lot of people are afraid of something that isn't homogeneous. Why do you think we freak out when we see UFOs? We're terrified because we're like, what do they want from us? Oh no, it's in my neighborhood. And some people all they grew up watching was the Maury Show. And they did that all black women are searching for their baby's daddies and throwing their wigs off behind stage and sleeping around, lazy, no job. A lot of it has to do with the media perception of the black woman. Maury played every day. But how many times did you see a news story of a black new woman business owner opening her own shop. And people have grown up with this idea that we're all like that. And that is another reason why I was raised to be a very upstanding citizen and speak properly and everything. I got so much shit growing up. Oh, you think you're better than us? Oh, you think you're better because you're light skinned and you talk like that? I'm like, what?
It is interesting that you bring up the media portrayal of the black woman, because we were talking about Malcolm X and the Black Panther, and it was Malcolm X who said that the Negro woman is the most, I forget the exact vocabulary, but I think the most vilified woman, and either in the United States or in the world. And not until you really kind of dig deep into racial epithets, until you dig deep into media portrayal, societal understanding of black women. And I didn't even think about it in the perspective that you just brought up, which was the Maury Show. The shows I grew up most relating to was probably like Family Matters, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, but that was the only real kind of show showcasing any people of color. And of course it was surrounding like family values, because but I also feel like that had to offset the reality shows that is Maury Povich or Jerry Springer, things like that.
And what are you more apt to watch? Some drama or something where you learn a lesson? You know, if it bleeds, it leads in the news, they say. And people are going to go for the exciting, ooh, I can't wait to find out if that's, you know, the baby's dad. Like, you know, whereas you have Urkel dropping something, oh, did I do that? You know, come on, what are you going to go for, really? You know, I can't tell you how many times, you know, just based on my name alone, how many phone interviews I've had. And I walk in the first day, and they have no clue who I am.
That's also funny that you say that, because I know someone who his mother gave him a specifically white-sounding name, so because she thought it would help him on job applications.
And this is true.
Yeah, that's why
true.
my name is the way it is.
Wow. And it's a juxtaposition. It's such a like a cultural juxtaposition, because that's something I didn't have to think about growing up. And that's something that I didn't know about. And this person I'm speaking of, he's 27 years old.
Yeah.
So, like, we're talking generations ago, people were purposely giving their children names that did not relate to their culture for the sake of a better future. That's insane to me.
People were erasing a part of their identity to appease what was considered normal and what's going to be better for their future. Yeah, to survive.
I really want to say that survival is a discussion in and of itself. I've had my own experience with racial tensions because of my interracial relationship with my family. And the ironic thing is, part of my family that started off most against my relationship with a black man was actually like my Mexican side of the family. And that's because in my particular instance, that side of the family is very fair skinned. They're very light skinned. They are what I consider to be my white side of the family. When I had to think about this in a completely different plane of thought, because when this happened, it's so easy to say, oh, you hate him because he's black. You hate me because I'm not white enough. But to my grandparents, it's not that they wanted me to be white. It's that they wanted me to have opportunities. And every opportunity that they were afforded because they literally looked better. They presented themselves in a way that they used the word sophisticated. But now I use the word white. Because sophisticated, when they say sophisticated, they mean do your hair this way. They mean wear this. Don't show your tribal tattoos. Don't show your culture. Don't talk about your middle name. Don't talk about the history of all of this. And so many times, sophisticated is synonymous with white, which is synonymous with survival. Like, in order to survive in the economy and the society that we have today, in order to compete with other members of your own race, really, you have to act more white.
It is crazy that we even have to say that.
Yeah, and it's so easy to vilify people for wanting to act white, or vilifying people for acting white. And a lot of times it might not even be for the sake of survival. Sometimes that just might be how people talk. That just might be how people look. But it's that divide because in the end, who gets afforded the privilege?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I find myself in the last few years, I started wearing more natural hairstyles, whether it be just wearing my natural hair out or wearing extensions or weaves or wigs. A lot of the times, the pressure, let's say if I'm going for a job interview, I felt the pressure to make sure I straighten out those curls. I want to look professional.
The fact that we are using those kind of words, professional, automatically seems to demean who you are naturally. And that's why I do believe in the power of language. If you repeat something enough, people are going to believe it. And I really I really dislike that we see a culture that's not of our own as superior than ours in order to survive in a country that is mixed. It is mixed. And I hate that we see ourselves as a melting pot or an appropriation of all these cultures, but specifically geared toward white profiting.
I am mixed. I'm a woman of mixed race, and I have experienced both sexism and racism in my life, never to the amount or extremes that my very own black friends have. There's not one black person I know that I have had a worse experience than. So to put that in place, I also have to bring in my economic and my socioeconomic demographic. I grew up in an environment where everyone looked like me. I remember getting so mad at my parents growing up because everyone in my class had long Hawaiian names with like 32 letters. And I had a 3-syllable Hawaiian name. So I was saying, I want a longer name. I want longer hair. I want to look more brown. I want to look darker. I want to act more Hawaiian. I want to act more what everyone else is around me. So I never experienced that. Racism to me seemed like something that was done away with at the end of segregation and Jim Crow era. But when I moved here and I realized that it's so much more nuanced, that just because we're all equal under the law does not mean we are seen equal by our peers.
Some are in the quote Animal Farm, some are more equal than others.
Yeah, and the thing is, I personally, I take extreme pride. I rarely, if ever, straighten my hair because I don't own a straightener. So that because that's part of my cultural identity, because that's part of my heritage. You are not the first black woman that has said to me that they fixed their hair to be perceived in a certain way. And it's just astounding to me because that's not something that you would hear a white person say. Because no matter how they do their hair, it's kind of fashionable. And I do feel like if you're, especially a woman of color, how you do your hair affects the perception that you give to yourself.
I want to say there was like a bill or a law passed not too long ago focused on that specific thing.
Oh, absolutely.
There was, you know what I'm talking about?
I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm trying to recall if it was, I know there was an instance where there was a specific state and there was a debate about it because a woman was denied a job opportunity because of how she wore her hair. You know, a black woman, how she wore her
natural hair.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the whole debate, basically, she was overturned and the final verdict was, it's not against the law to deny you based on your hair because you can't tell race by hair. That was literally how it worked out. I have not seen any real updates to it. I know that the ADA, the anti-discrimination laws, I do believe that hair is now included on a federal level, but
yeah.
I
hope so.
Checked. I need to double check.
But again, like the fact that we have to check because we don't know anymore. There like I said, there keeps being new laws. They were like, wait, why was that already in place? Like, why did it take 30-something, 100-something years for that to finally be
and we have to worry
sure thing?
If our hair is legal, if our hair makes us presentable.
Right. I wanted to bring up two things, talking about this earlier. When a black woman has, let's say, longer hair, what's the question? You guys probably already know what this question is, but what's the question?
Can I feel your hair? Can I touch your hair?
Can I touch your hair, or is it fake?
Oh yeah, the is it fake one.
Mm-hmm.
But and then that goes into an entirely different discussion about what makes it fake. Like it's mine. This is my look. It's my identity.
You know, just let it be what it is, and just focus on the individual as a person.
And it can be fashionable. It doesn't always have to be cultural. Most of the times it is. But what if it's just your style that day? Why does it have to be questioned?
You know, why do we have to ask that question in the first place? I just find it interesting how easy it is for people to assume that I'm not capable of growing my own hair. There's something wrong with me to where I don't know how to take care of my hair like any other person. What happened? It just stays short? No. I like to wear what are called protective style. I'm currently experimenting with henna treatments on my hair. I'm growing it out to a length where I feel comfortable wearing it, you know, out and about and completely natural.
As is your right.
Yeah, so I wear, you know, I love wearing weaves because I can change it up. I can wear different colors and whatnot and not damage my hair. But a lot of people will assume like, oh, well, you're wearing that fake hair because you don't have any, because you don't know how to grow it.
Oh, and there's definitely a stigma.
Yeah.
And I kind of want to go back to what you said. It's the ease, the fact that people feel entitled to ask you that, the fact that it's not seen as offensive. And just because people don't see it as offensive doesn't mean it can't be taken offensively, because you can have good intentions and it can still work.
Yeah, or even the fact that, you know, they're asking these kind of questions, it means that they have not interacted enough with other people of color. You know, and again, it goes back to the idea of what's normal. You know, for them, they don't consider it normal, so they feel like they need to ask. Like, it pisses me off that they don't want to treat it as something normal.
It also, and that kind of goes into another article I was reading about a former employee of the magazine called Page Six. Basically, there was this individual felt that racism, sexism was abundant in their workplace. Forgive me. At some point, the editor-in-chief of Page Six released a statement on, you know, a positive statement about Black Lives Matter, to which this individual responded that this is performative at best and ignorant at worst. And the editor actually reached out and asked them, like, why don't you tell me where this is wrong? And that's when they're like, this I don't need to tell you. Like, it's not my responsibility as a member of the Black community. It's not my responsibility to tell you, like, if you don't know this, like, you can't just go up to Black people and ask, what's your problem? Because one, there's resources. We're not even going to talk about the level of resources that are in absolute abundance right now and trending all over social media. So there's an abundance of resources. Two, it's not on minorities to explain their trauma, to really discuss what makes them feel other or less than or inferior. You know,
have somebody meet you and say, oh my gosh, you're not an angry Black woman.
Oh my goodness, and I feel like that has definitely been said to you.
I you know, and a lot of these things, I just laugh it off. You know, because some people are just ignorant. They don't know. And it's funny because whenever I'm dating a white guy, I'll ask them, I'm like, you ever dated a Black girl before? And depending on what they say, I'm like, all right, well, I'm either going to have to teach them the rules. Yeah. Or, all right, cool, one less thing I have to do. But, you know, don't be putting your hands in my hair like that, you know. You got to have permission. Just little things. Like.
And it does go back to intentions, because so many times, in my experience, almost every single time I have been made to feel guilty for pointing out privilege or pointing out problems. It's pretty much always been by white individuals, because I can say, hey, I'm uncomfortable with this, and I'm not attacking you. So many times things have been said to me, and I'm just like, hey, that's not okay. And it turns around, we're like, oh, but I meant so well. And it someone I used to go to school with said it very, very eloquently on Facebook this morning. So she's allergic to chocolate. And she was saying, all right, so somebody brings me a chocolate, they bake me this beautiful chocolate cake for my birthday, and they bring it to me. I can't eat it. I'm allergic. Does that mean I'm crapping on all of the time you spent on it? Does that mean that I don't love you for trying to provide this experience for me? Like, no, it's just I can't accept this because of whatever reason, because of some issues that are going on. And the wrong response to somebody saying, I'm allergic to your chocolate cake, is not to be upset. It's to be, oh, you're allergic, my bad. I'll take this back. Next time I come to the table, I won't be bringing chocolate cake or chocolate.
Right. Yeah. It's just a learning lesson. And, and I say this having grown up with, I call him my father. He's passed away now, but I grew up with a white father. I think that also brings a unique perspective to the table too, because he stepped in. He was my father for all intents and purposes. That was Thomas Grettenberger, the German man that introduced me to Bob Marley. I mean, the coolest cat ever. The coolest cat ever. I love him. I wish a lot more people could just see the world through his eyes, because it didn't matter. He got a lot of mixed babies out there. I love you, Dad. Put your business out there, but a lot of mixed babies. And I said, you know what we need to do to just kill all this racism stuff? We all just need to start having mixed babies, ambiguous mixed babies. We don't have any more problems.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because the KKK argument is that you don't want to dilute both races. I hate that. But it does still give an othering to mixed kids. As much as I'm aware that people might not have looked just like me, people have lived my experience. There's very rarely in Hawaii will you meet someone who is all one thing.
Right.
They're pretty much guaranteed, especially if they're a kid. They're mixed. It's just mixed babies. Right. When it kind of comes down to it, when I came here, I didn't meet a whole lot of mixed kids.
Yeah.
And the mixed kids that I met were, a mix of black and white, and I can't really relate to either one of those cultures. The one thing that I could really relate to is this idea that you're not completely one, you're not completely other, so you're just too foreign for both. So you don't really have, you have a foot in each one, but it's not that you don't feel wholly one, it's that you're not really allowed to be proud of one thing, because they're like, and this kind of goes back to the All Lives Matter thing. It's like, if I say I'm proud to be Asian, I don't want somebody to come up to me and be like, well, what about your Hawaiian race? What about your Mexican? What about your whatever? Because I'm so equally proud to be everything that I am. That's what makes me me. Before the protest, there was a lot of racial tensions against Asians because of the fact that COVID-19 came from China. So it was known as Chinese flu, Kung flu. The only time I have ever been singled out for my Asian ethnicity was in a grocery store in the beginning. Somebody called me a chink. I've never in my life, and that's crazy to me, because in my mind, I don't look that Asian. And I wasn't presenting myself as an Asian woman. I was at the store getting groceries.
Right.
And the absolute ironic thing that day was I left the store, and on my way home, in the exact same day, somebody called me a wetback. So it's like, all right, okay, so
you got a duper. Wow.
I did. I really hit the racial jackpot that day.
The racial lottery, I guess.
I mean, I don't know if this is to play devil's advocate, but the dude that called me a wetback was very clearly on something. he wasn't all there, but didn't mean it hurt less.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it was.
Right. Yeah.
He looked at me when he said it. Even if he didn't know what he was saying, I was called this. I was called these two things in the same day.
Right.
And the thing is, I am Asian. I am Mexican.
Yeah.
But that's what I was identified as. So it's like, all right, so you're mixed. Not one of this, but I guess I get all the slurs today.
Yeah, and and I got it from both sides. Too dark for the white community, and I was too light for the black community.
Yeah.
And it sucks being in between.
Yeah.
Because, people automatically assume that I assumed that because I'm lighter skinned, I think I'm better than, or, and it all goes back to those conceptions that we were talking about earlier. And I'm growing up, I'm like, what are you even talking about? What? We were friends yesterday. What is this all about? Like, I don't get it.
It's kind of,
and I really relate to that. I'm everybody calls me a Mexican, even though that's only technically a third of my identity or a half of my racial identity. I'm half Mexican, I'm half Salvadorian, and actually it's been crazy because whenever I do travel, they call me a wetback, a Mexican. When I'm in Florida, they call me Cuban or Puerto Riqueño. When I'm in New York, same thing. Like, no matter where I go, I am immediately put into a category. And the truth is, I'm American. Like, it wasn't until I was in the UK that I was called an American. But again, with what you were saying, so in my family, we grew up in a very suburban area. We made pretty good money. We're technically considered like upper middle class to middle class. And I received an amazing education. I went to the #1 school in California at the time. But when I was there, I was too white for the few Mexicans that were allowed into that school. I was too Mexican for the Asian community that was there. The only way I connected with them really was through my love of Yu-Gi-Oh! And anime and that kind of stuff. But I was immediately put down because of that, and I was too dark for the other people of color. Yeah, I immediately just felt attacked before anybody even knew me as a person. And like I said, like all of us there, the majority of us were American. We were second generation Americans. It sucks that like my identity is not who I am, but where my family happened to be from, and the fact that I was educated and was using big words put me in a very weird category. I have family members who, as kids, refused to learn Spanish because people had attacked them for saying things in Spanish, and they wanted to be seen as American. They wanted to be treated as equals. And these are like 6-year-old kids having these kind of thoughts already. That's the part that angers me.
This is kind of where this whole othering comes from. And this is incredibly prevalent, not just in our society, but in just socioeconomic systems.
Yeah.
And it kind of this goes back to apartheid in South Africa. Like we think that there's no correlation here, but there is. There really is. A main difference is that in the continental U.S., you had whites and coloreds. That's where the segregation was. That's where you had different drinking fountains, different eateries, that's where the segregation was. That you had whites and you had coloreds. There's a lot to break through when it comes to the place of mixed children in that area. Now, if you take the same time frame in South Africa, you had whites, blacks, and coloreds. Coloreds were other. So even though there was an other, there was still an area for others. And I feel that, not that I want, people to be racially profiled and segregated, but it's this idea that there still is this black and white mentality in the US. You kind of aren't allowed to be other growing up. It's not, it doesn't feel like it's celebrated. And it doesn't feel like you can be more than just one. It feels, in my third person perspective, very black and white still. Because when I went to the South, you know this, they called me white. And that's astounding to me, but that I did not grow up in the South. So I'm who am I to say that that's what I am? Because that's what I am perceived to be, but that's not what I am.
And it goes back to the whole thing saying people are afraid of the unknown. They're afraid of what they don't understand. Like, when people ask me like, oh, what are you? Because, on certain days, the way I wear my hair, I could be, Puerto Rican, I could be black, I could be something else. Who knows? It just depends on the day. A lot of times when people come up to me and they will ask me that, I'll kind of reply with a little snarky comment. I'm Ashley. No, I meant, what are you? I said, I'm Ashley. I'm a human being. And that's just the way I choose to approach it now. To all the listeners out there, just remember, we're all going through some struggles. And just because we're having a Black Lives Matter rally right now doesn't mean that we're putting anybody else's struggle down. We're all struggling together right now, but it's just our house that's on fire. We need some help, and we'll be there. We'll be right there for you too.